So far, we know that Ambar's life has been busy. He's gone from slave to educated slave to soldier and then to commander. Now that was all in part one, so if you're not up to speed, then make sure you go and check that one out right here and then come straight back to this one. In this video, we see him become the ultimate warrior and king. So we pick up Ambar's story with the assassination of Sultana Bibi. With Ahmadnagar now in disarray, Ambar took it upon himself to restore the region. He would need all the manpower he could muster in order to pose any threat to the Mughals. But luckily, remember those 1,500 loyal soldiers that he had? Well, by this point, that had expanded to 7,000. And it would just keep expanding over the next 15 years or so, up to around 20,000. Ambar had been able to rally support from every part of the conflicting Deccan region, although most of the men serving under him were Marathas, a people of Hindu Indian heritage famed for their expertise in ground battle. With their knowledge of the terrain and the survival skills that they'd be continuing to hone, they were a fearsome opponent. And with Ambar's tactics of quick, fast-moving ambushes, light, nimble cavalry, they were able to keep the much larger Mughal Empire at bay. Whilst the war was ongoing, Ambar looked to instill himself with the political power needed to rule Ahmadnagar. Now this is where we really see his intelligence and nous come to the fore. Knowing that an African wouldn't be accepted as the leader, Ambar brought an heir of the Nizam Shah family, the ones I mentioned in part one, back to Ahmadnagar before making him the new Sultan. Ambar then offered his daughter's hand in marriage so as to be as closely aligned with the leadership as possible. And this worked. Ambar was made the regent minister of Ahmadnagar, and he was essentially the decision maker or the puppet master. He held the seat of power. Over the next decade, Ahmadnagar remained under constant threat from the Mughal Empire, but Ambar's men were able to consistently hold them off. The new Nizam Shah ruler, well, he was perfectly happy in his position and with the job that Ambar was doing. That is until 1610. When one of his many wives managed to convince him that Ambar was a threat. This was also while she was apparently racially abusing Ambar's daughter, the Sultan's first wife. Ambar's response to this? Well, he had both the Sultan and the offending wife assassinated. He then appointed Nizam Shah's 5-year-old son as the new Sultan, and it probably doesn't come as any surprise that after this, Ambar's position of power wouldn't be questioned again. The war with the Mughals continued, with regions within Ahmadnagar frequently changing hands, but eventually Ambar was able to establish control of the Sultanate. This was helped a lot by the peace treaty that he managed to put in place in 1612, and he was able to begin an economic expansion whilst modernising Ahmadnagar and securing its defences against further invasion should the treaty be breached. Of course, the treaty was breached. Just 4 years later, in 1616, Ambar was caught on the back foot against the advancing Mughals, led by Emperor Jahangir, as those nimble tactics that Ambar had been using so brilliantly were finally sussed out by the opposition. They had now started to dig trenches and Ambar's men would be trapped. He had finally been outwitted. Okay, so let's visualize this because the next bit is actually quite crazy. Ambar has spent all this time defending Ahmadnagar from the north in a real David Goliath situation. Having now suffered his first defeat, the new Sultan in Bijapur is colluding with the Mughals. Not in a sneaky or underhand kind of way, he'd literally given up all hope. He didn't see any other outcome than the Mughals invading all of the Deccan. So in some strange rationale, he wanted to destroy Ahmadnagar in order to save Bijapur. No, I don't get it either. So, Ambar, predicting a unified advancement of Mughal and Bijapuri soldiers, set up probably the most cunning ambush yet. It was during the rainy season and Ambar took high ground overlooking a lake. So, as he watched the forces approach, he ordered his men to strike the lake's dam, causing it to burst and flood the marshes into a thick, muddy bog. They were stuck. Now, you're not going to believe this, but the Mughals had become so frustrated by Ambar's constant ability to outwit them that soldiers were now defecting to him in large numbers. Not only was he still growing his army, but now he was shrinking the opposition. Of course, this ultimately led to them retreating. Ambar would pass away just 2 years later at the age of 78. And sadly, his son who would succeed him wasn't able to keep the Mughals at bay. But wow, what a story. An African slave ruling in India. He had all the physical and mental attributes needed to defend against a mammoth of an army right up until his death, even gaining respect from his greatest enemy, the emperor of the Mughal army. His eulogy to Ambar went as follows: "In warfare and in command, in sound judgment and in administration, he had no rival or equal. He closed his career in honor. History records no other instance of an Abyssinian slave arriving at such eminence." Now, it must be said that by this time the emperor was too ill to actually write this tribute himself, so it was outsourced, meaning we can't actually know whether he would have spoken so highly of the man, especially considering that at one stage he had commissioned a portrait depicting himself firing an arrow at Ambar's decapitated head. Yeah. If you enjoyed this short series, then I've got a feeling you might like this one too. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one.